for Bring Your Own Lunch. Personal stories about the business with my daddy, Dave T. Koenig.
All right, come on in. Have a seat. Welcome. This is the Bring Your Own Lunch podcast at bringyourownlunch.com, the magic of iTunes, the majesty of Stitcher, and however you found your way to download this podcast, I thank you. As you heard at the top, my name is Dave T. Koenig. I'm an actor, writer, director, producer, comedian, all-around swell dude. I've got a couple of TV appearances coming up in April, but I'll talk about those in a couple of weeks. And, of course, I'm the host of the podcast you're listening to right now, BYOL. That's the hashtag we use if you want to reach out on social media. We're out there, facebook.com/bringyourownlunch. You can follow us on Twitter at BYOL Podcast. You can follow us on Instagram at Bring Your Own Lunch. That one's kind of starting to heat up. And, of course, you can go to our own website, bringyourownlunch.com, to get all the information about the guests past, present, and future of this program. Now, if you go back and listen to the history of this program, you know that I had previously been the host or co-host of a podcast called the Commercials Free Podcast with my good friend Ken Pond at thecommercials.tv, and you can still go listen to them there. And my first guest on this program was Abigail Shaman, somebody who I had interviewed back then with Ken on the Commercials Free Podcast. And we're going back to the well this time. My guest this week is a fantastic guest, Kevin Allison. He is well known to many for being a member of the legendary sketch comedy team, The State, that had a very memorable run on MTV back in the early 90s. It's a group that has spawned tremendous success stories out of the group, and many of the people who were involved in that, you know, doing various different things today, and Kevin is no exception. Today, Kevin is the host of a massively successful podcast called The Risk Show, and he has rode the wave of podcasting and is really at the forefront of making success out of a do-it-yourself attitude, and Kevin's show is phenomenal. It's a show where people can go on and tell stories that they're not necessarily comfortable telling, and it's a challenge to the self to go on there and talk about something that was a secret or something you haven't resolved or a story from your childhood that you want to share with people, and it's very cathartic for people who are in it and people who listen to it, and it's an amazing experience when you go listen to it. It's not for the faint of heart often, but that's okay, because sometimes you have to challenge yourself by exposing yourself to information and scenarios that aren't comfortable to you. And this episode is sort of a microcosm of that concept. I'll explain. See, I contacted Kevin. I have known Kevin for a bunch of time, and Kevin was a guest on the Commercials Free Podcast way back when with Ken. I met Kevin when he was the artistic director at the People's Improv Theater at a time when Ken and Laura Dillman and I were doing a sketch comedy group, which was also called The Commercials. And so Kevin and I were contacting each other through that, and we, had some conversations, and I've kept up with him since then. And super nice guy, really, really cool. So I scheduled the interview with him on a Friday a couple of weeks ago. Now, unbeknownst to me, on Thursday, the day before I did the interview, Kevin appeared on another podcast. That podcast, Marc Maron's WTF. Now, if you don't know Marc Maron's WTF, well, it's probably one of the top 5, maybe, influential, successful, popular podcasts out there. He's done an amazing job with it, and it has caused a renaissance of his career. And if you listen to the first episode of this podcast, this one right here, the Bring Your Own Lunch, owes a lot of its DNA to WTF. Mark paved the way for shows like this, podcasts like this, where people just sit down and chat about stuff. To take hold, and this show really sits in the shadow of that show's massive success and greatness. So it's an honor for Kevin to have been on that show, and I'm thrilled for him that he was able to sit with Mark and go through the WTF experience, because it's a very unique experience for anybody who's been on that show. Now, of course, it put me in an interesting situation because my show shares a lot of DNA with WTF. And the day after Kevin's episode came out, here I was sitting with Kevin, supposed to be talking about stuff. So I thought of it as a bit of a challenge. It was a little daunting, and I was a little bit unnerved by it because, frankly, I didn't want to do exactly what Marc Maron does. And Marc Maron is a master of what he does. So there was no point in me trying to retread that same stuff. Yet at the same time, I wanted to have a really good in-depth conversation with Kevin. So walking into it, I was like, boy, I hope this is okay, because I knew that we weren't going to cover a lot of the state, because I'm sure Marc Maron was going to cover a lot of the state. I was pretty sure that Mark covered the advent of risk and where that came from. So I wasn't going to steer the conversation that direction. So I kind of took a wing and a prayer and sat down with Kevin and hoped everything would be well, knowing that Kevin's a good guy and that he's an interesting guy. And there certainly would be no shortage of stuff to talk about. And when I got there right off the bat, he said, when he sat down with Marc Maron, he was able to give the basics of his career to Mark, but he wasn't really able to get into a lot of issues, a lot of things that he wanted to talk about on a personal level. And I kind of felt like maybe sitting with me gave him an opportunity to let that stuff fly. And the conversation ended up taking on a life of its own. It's fascinating stuff. Kevin is involved in so many different things, and he's willing and able to discuss about so many different issues about his life and about life in general, about psychology, about culture. And I think what ended up coming out of it was just a fascinating conversation. We don't get into a lot about the state. We barely mention it. And we do get into some of the psychology behind risk, but we don't get into like what started it necessarily. We didn't go through chapter verse of where risk came from. We just get a bit of a cursory thing there. But I think what we do is talk about things that I hope you will listen to and you will take some nugget of wisdom from, because I think he's somebody who's got a lot of great thoughts about many different issues, and we do talk some uncomfortable subjects for some. So I'll warn you now that the material here is not appropriate necessarily for all audiences. So young kids, it's up to you whether or not you want them to listen, but don't tell me later that I didn't warn you. We don't get graphic again. It's sort of like last week with Candace Holdorf. We don't get graphic or anything like that, but it's maybe not ideal for all scenarios and audiences. So use your own discretion as far as what you want to listen to. But it's not because what comes out of this conversation isn't intelligent and well thought out and well articulated. So that's not an argument as far as I'm concerned. And if you really want to hear the history of Kevin's career and what happened with the state from start to finish, and if you want to really know where risk came from in more detail, I welcome you. Go listen to Marc Maron's podcast. I'll have a link to that episode in the show notes for this particular episode of Bring Your Own Lunch. And if you really want to hear me talking to Kevin about the state stuff, you can always go back to the Commercials Free podcast, and I will have a link to that as well. But today, open up your mind and get ready for an interesting ride. My conversation with Kevin Allison coming up in just a second. I kind of had a quiet week since the last time we talked, so it wasn't a real career heavy week for me, but I did find out just before I started recording, speaking of kind of copycats, if you want to call this podcast a copycat of WTF, which I don't, but it's kind of funny that it came up. But just before I started rolling, the song Blurred Lines that Robin Thicke put out, Pharrell helped him with that one. And there was a lot of talk at the time that they may have copied that song from a 1977 Marvin Gaye song, Got to Give It Up. And I've spent a lot of time listening to Got to Give It Up, and I got to give it up to the jury. They do sound very much alike. So much so that now Robin Thicke and Pharrell now owe Marvin Gaye's estate, I suppose, $7.3 million. So it's an interesting situation what's happening now with music, where there's so much exposure to so much out there. When I was growing up, you had albums and you had the radio, and that was your exposure to music. Of course, we had cassette tapes as well. Sometimes the cassettes would be distributed among people, but for the most part, if you didn't have the actual recording in your hand and they weren't playing it on the radio, you didn't hear that song. Nowadays, if you want to hear any song whatsoever, you can just look for it online and probably find it within the first 10 seconds of looking. So nowadays, we're influenced by so many different sources of media that it's going to be harder and harder and harder to seem unique. And it's the artist's responsibility to be even more educated about what's out there so they don't start copying other people's stuff. Now, earlier this year, there was another case where Sam Smith reached a settlement with Tom Petty over the song Stay With Me, which won a Grammy, or nominated for a Grammy. And there was a lot of accusation that the song I Won't Back Down had a very similar chorus and a very similar feel to it. So Sam Smith and Tom Petty reached an agreement, and who knows what the agreement was because it's, under lock and key. But it seems like it's harder and harder and harder to just get away with copying things. I remember back, again, when I was young, Vanilla Ice got into a lot of trouble because he stole a hook from Queen and David Bowie. Ice Ice Baby borrowed a lot from Under Pressure, which is one of my favorite songs of all time. So he had to give writing credit and stuff like that. So similarly, in the case of Stay With Me, Tom Petty and also Jeff Lynne now have co-writing credits on Sam Smith's song Stay With Me. So that's probably the basics of what can happen. But in the case of Pharrell and Robin Thicke, well, they've got to pony up $7.3 million between the two of them, and apparently each of them walked away with about $5 million each for that song. So it's going to be a lean year for both of them, I'm sure. But what was really interesting to me, in a very large coincidence, on Sunday, I was taking a ride with my family, and on the radio, a local radio station here that I can listen to in the New York area, the Westchester area, really, the Peak, which is out of Westchester, is a fantastic radio station. It's like a throwback radio station. They happen to play the David Bowie song TVC 15. And as soon as it came on, and I'd never heard it before, both my wife and I were like, wait a minute. This sounds a lot like Blurred Lines. So I'm going to put the video to TVC 15, the YouTube video, in the show notes for this episode. And you tell me what you think. And it's very possible that it's just an homage. It's very possible that it's an unintentional borrowing. But it's also very possible that $7.3 million is just scratching the surface if David Bowie ever decides to make a deal out of it. All right, before we get into the interview, let's thank Banuba. They are all original, I assure you. You can go check them out, banuba.net, BANOOBA.net. Their music is what you hear at the beginning, middle, and end of this show. They are great, and they are a huge part of the show, and I can't thank them enough. And I humbly just can offer thanks to them every week, and hopefully you will go check them out, download some of their music, and go see them live. Buy their music, of course. That would be even better. And if you really want to help us out, just take a second. If you like what you hear, I would love it if you would go to iTunes or Stitcher, if you're a Stitcher type person, and on iTunes especially, rate this show, give it 5 stars if you can, review this show, say amazingly good things about this show if you can, and subscribe to the show, either to subscribe or not. So, just to subscribe. That will help us help you tell iTunes that we're doing good stuff here, that we deserve more people to know about it, and it'll help us get the word out, because this is a word of mouth effort. It's we don't have a big budget for marketing, and certainly don't have a lot of advertising dollars to throw behind it. So the best thing we can hope is that you like it, and that you'll tell 2 friends, and then they'll tell 2 friends, and they'll tell 2 friends, and so on and so on and so on, until we're all using the same shampoo. All right, let's get into it with Kevin Allison. A fantastic guy, a fantastic apartment. You'll find out it's a lively place where he lives, and we'll hear some interesting stories from what is a very interesting guy. Sit back, relax, and open your mind. Here's Kevin. Enjoy. Yeah, now I know why you were laughing at me when I said this room is soundproofed.
Oh yeah, it's and this is very quiet right now.
What's the worst it's gotten?
Oh well, there's literally an episode of Risk where you can hear, because we do what they call Easter eggs at the end of most episodes, unless an episode is really serious. We'll put an Easter egg at the end, and a woman told a story about being, well, not raped, but molested, getting into a rapey situation. And in the middle of it, the women next door started having a howling rosary ceremony in Spanish, like eight old women being like, la, 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 Maria.
Oh my! How do you?
And you can just hear me saying, hold on, and sighing. She's like, what is that? I'm like, it's a Catholic ceremony. I know, because I was raised very Catholic.
Oh, you were? Well, I guess we found our starting point. My first question was going to be, by the way, has Marc Maron ruined you for me? Because in my infinite wisdom, I reached out to you and we scheduled it the day after you appear on WTF.
Well, you know what JC, my producer and best friend and dominatrix, kind of. I mean, not literally my dominatrix, but she is the person who
cracks the whip,
helps me keep my whole entire life in order, both professional and personal. I'm not so good on the personal part. I tend to wreck that a lot myself. But no, she's always saying, gosh, it'll be good when you have that Maron thing behind you, because that has such a wide audience that hopefully you'll then be able to start talking about other things. Because I knew that when I sat down with Marc, I would have to give a very basic, here are the general biography.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of subjects, like a lot of that information about becoming kinky, mostly the whole becoming kinky and starting Risk, that's all kind of old news.
Yeah.
Lately, I've been dealing with the fact that I've been in kind of a rut with all that kinky stuff, have become a little bit like confused, bored, fatigued, and have started seeing a kink-aware therapist.
Wow.
Yeah. There's if you are someone who has particular fetishes or are into BDSM or whatever it is, and you think, I'm a little bit on the freakish side sexually, and I really want to talk to a therapist about that, there's something called kink-aware professionals online.
Interesting.
And you can find a therapist wherever you are in the United States that is like, yeah, I know all about, the nastiest stuff, and I don't pathologize it necessarily.
Okay, sure. Yeah, no, I guess that makes sense in that you don't want to have to start from zero if you're going to go see a therapist. You want to start somewhere around 25.
Yeah, well, I've done therapy before, and I did it when I was about, I would say late 20s, and then around in my early 30s, different therapists that I saw, and they were always women, and there was always a mother thing that came up. There was always where I felt like I was speaking to someone who was kind of tisk about a lot of my sexual habits. And so I was like, you know what? I came of age in the 90s, as a gay man, at a time when mentoring was not so much there anymore for a brief period, because in gay male culture, there's an ancient history. It goes way back to Socrates and Plato of an older man takes on a younger man. Partly for his sexual.
Yeah. Well, that's the old story.
But also to educate, to be to kind of take him on as an apprentice as well. And that was very popular still in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. But then by the time I came to New York in the 90s, AIDS had so devastated the men who were just 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years older than me as a college kid, that they were not out socializing. It was weird at that time. It was just kids. It was just college kids going out and doing stuff in the gay male scene then. And
you didn't necessarily know the trying to come up with something that's not going to sound like an innuendo, but the ins and outs of life as
exactly. There weren't so. They were all going to funerals and were just dealing with this massive sort of watching all their friends die, and we're not in the mood to be part of the larger gay male culture, other than maybe activism, other than
sure
act up and all that.
Yeah.
So yeah, now it's different. Now men of my generation, for example, myself, I'm very into younger guys, and younger guys there's this whole trope of me fitting into what they call the daddy type. Everyone loves in the kinky realm and in the gay community to give these stereotypical little names to types. So I'm the daddy type who would typically get together with someone who's playing kind of a boyish role. So it's back to that old Socrates, Plato sort of thing.
Sure.
But what's weird now is that there's another disconnect between these generations because these kids, these guys in their 20s now, did not really grow up with homosexuality being quite as stigmatized or under the carpet as it was when I grew up. They've seen it like all over the place on TV, all over the place on the internet. And, the whole "it gets better" thing that Dan Savage was doing. Any kid that has a little bit of, I don't know, it finds it in himself to reach out is going to find, friends immediately. But there's also this weird thing of the hookup apps kind of destroying the sense of community in the gay community.
I guess in so many ways, like social media has changed everything, not just, the one specific culture, but all of them.
Yeah. What's so weird to me, what I cannot figure out, and I want to keep asking straight people and gay people about this, is why did the internet help straight people develop a hugely thriving, hugely active, and hugely like social and kind of like productive kink community? And why did the internet kind of have the opposite effect on gay men?
Interesting. So what do you say it had a positive effect on growing the kink community. Do you think, do you consider that a positive or a negative? And on the flip side, in the gay community, do you think the kink community, shrinking, do you consider that a negative, or is it just a matter of fact?
Yeah, well, no, here's how I see it. And I'm not a sociologist. I'm sure that some people might want to correct me or have a completely different view. But, in the 50s and 60s, especially, gay men became very, very, they had what they called the old leather guard, right? There were rituals and protocols for how BDSM worked. And those guys that used to go to leather bars in the, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s were kind of the guardians of that. They all had secret languages, codes like the hanky code to show what fetish you were in by wearing a certain color hanky in your pocket, and all sorts. Like they would literally share like not 10 commandments, but kind of rules for how it works to be a good submissive, how it works to be a good dom, et cetera, how cruising works, how to follow the nonverbal communication of other men and all that. What happened was when the internet was created in the, or became very popular in the mid 90s, straight people started co-opting a lot of that and putting it online as saying, we can do this too. We can adapt a lot of this stuff for a wider kink community. Not that straight people weren't kinky in various ways.
Right. But I think, it's coming from the straight perspective. I look at the world now, and it's so much more free in terms of sexuality. You're able to engage in things, and people aren't nearly as judgmental. Your neighbor's not going to be nearly as judgmental as they used to be. Some of which is because you don't communicate with your neighbor at the level you used to back in the 50s. Mm-hmm. But I think people are just overall more accepting of people who are gay or have come from a kinky perspective or anything like that. And coming from a very vanilla standpoint, it's like, hey, how did that happen after I settled down and suddenly everything blew up and I'm completely removed from all of it?
Well, what's really interesting is that, Harvey Milk used to have a theory that coming out was the key. He had two theories. One, that a community that was at odds with the larger, populace, would be able to make a mark if it could prove that it was economically that, if we stop buying your beer was his first big campaign. If we stop buying Coors beer, we can get people's attention. because gay men drink a lot. But the second thing that
they could cripple the disco community entirely. Yeah.
But the second thing he really pushed was this idea that coming out was super, super necessary, because unless you're telling your story to your friends and your family and coworkers, people are just not going to be aware that it's there. And so he definitely won. That perspective definitely won the day, because gay men really did run with that idea. And AIDS actually even pushed it along further of making it seem, there was the whole idea that silence equals death. If you're hiding what you are, then you're only helping to prop up a system that, could lead to your demise. So we totally celebrated that and started coming out and talking about ourselves. Well, after a while, it's like, oh, all right, we're out now.
What do you do?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that what we're going through now with a lot of straight people who feel kinky, because, like Dan Savage says, I think that there is no normal. What people perceive, what we're fed through the media or through the church or whatever as being normal sexuality, probably fits very few people. Everyone's got a little something that's kind of odd or off the beaten track that turns them on.
I think the big deal is whether or not people are willing to talk about it.
Yeah.
Willing to discuss it, willing to admit it.
Right.
And people probably have skeletons going back generations in their families, but they don't talk about it. And that's the big thing.
And that's why I think that's part of what I'm putting together here is this theory that the internet, and especially FetLife is like Facebook for the entire kink community.
Okay.
It's huge. There are hundreds of thousands of people on it all around the world. And so it's not about hooking up with people, FetLife, in the same way that Facebook is not about hooking up with people.
Right.
Instead, it's a place to make friends, share ideas, tell people, hey, there's a workshop or there's a show or whatever, there's a camp, it's building community is what FetLife is all about. But it's mostly straight people. And there are just constantly very interesting conversations about, how do you guys feel about water sports or whatever the kink is that people are talking about in this and that corner of it? Or, how do you guys feel about people having certain racial fetishes or things like that? And I love that people are talking that way, but I feel like people are talking that way there and have built this wonderful kind of more or less mostly straight kink community online, because they're just feeling like, oh, it's time for us to come out of the closet. Whereas I feel like a lot of gay culture feels like we already came out of the closet. And I think that a lot of gay culture thinks, oh, well, we're done. And so gay men have retreated to just not going out to bars. There are a lot less gay bars now. Guys are just hooking up individually over Grindr and other hookup apps like that, which do not really foster community.
No, I think a lot of, the false sense of security we get from the internet, the anonymity, the ability to research things on a one way, if in the past you wanted to do research on something you felt about yourself but you weren't sure about, you had to go to the library. Yeah. And you had to look the librarian in the eye. You had to say, I want to learn about this. And there was a certain amount of, I guess, fear that went into that. But when you got to the internet and you, from the comfort of your home, you could research whatever you want.
Yeah.
It allowed you to feel, okay, there are other people out there. But like you said, it creates this false sense of community that doesn't really exist in the real world. And I think, and maybe you can come up with some suggestion as to how we get from where we are now, which is everybody's talking about it, but they're not talking about it in person, to talking about it in person. What do you think it's going to take?
I think that, like, for example, when I go to FetLife, the main reason that I'm going there is to usually try to drum up meetup sort of things. Like, for example, I have recently gotten into erotic hypnosis.
Now, what is that? Just so people...
Erotic hypnosis is a whole camp. It's a whole branch of kink. And of course, this is blatantly obvious when you think about it, but what I didn't realize at first is that in order to get into it, you first have to learn hypnosis without any eroticism attached to it, which is which is very complicated. Like, it
Sure.
takes a long time to learn how to be a good hypnotist.
Yeah, and you come to it, and you're practicing becoming a hypnotist yourself.
Yes.
Oh, so you're not just involved in the scene. You're actually trying to become a hypnotist. Wow.
So what I did was, knowing that, because I took 2 workshops in it, and I was like, yes, I'm definitely very interested in this. So now I go to FetLife and I just search for other guys who have hypno, that word, in their profiles in the New York area. And what is it? March 16th, I'm setting up this thing at this place, Gym Bar in Chelsea. I'm saying, in the basement from 8 to 10 on March 16th. If you're a gay man interested in hypnosis, let's just have beers together and start talking about it.
Right.
That, to me, like, that's how I was introduced to FetLife, because there's that story on Risk called Kevin Goes to Kink Camp.
Yeah.
The only reason I ever got onto FetLife in the first place was to put a profile there so that when I went to this kink camp, people would know how to reach me, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
So that, to me, from the very beginning, has been what I've seen FetLife, how I've seen it work best, is if it's a place where people talk and say, let's meet up. So yeah, I think you put your finger right on it. The key is to get people face to face.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
I kind of enjoy being a social hub. I kind of enjoy being one of those people who actively tries to bring people together. I have a lot of social anxiety. You wouldn't guess that, because, and that's true for so many performers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we have become experts at overcompensating.
Yeah.
And we do have it within us to be very, very social, very, very out there. But at the same point, we're terribly self-conscious. And I think that's the people who are most successful probably balance those two like a high wire act better than anybody else.
Oh God. Yeah. My therapist and I have talked about this a lot, this whole idea of being on. Like, for example, I'm very, very proud of that Marc Maron interview, that What the Fuck interview. But I listen to it critically because I can tell just how on I'm laughing all throughout it. And that's usually a sign that I'm kind of nervous and my personality is turned up a notch.
Sure.
It makes me a little uncomfortable to listen to it because I think, oh God, I'm laughing too much. My personality is too big here. And as a storyteller, a true storyteller, I'm always, like you said, walking a high wire, trying not to be too self-deprecating or too arrogant or too whatever.
Yeah. I go through the same thing. Exactly that same thing.
Right. And it's funny because the reason I started Risk was, or one of the reasons I started it, was because my mother used to say, don't be too feminine. Don't be too exaggerated with your hand gestures. Don't be too this or too that. So the reason I felt it was so risky to start this show was because I was so afraid of being too much this, too much that. But no matter how it's kind of like Jung once said. He said that Freud has this theory that a person can come in and talk to the therapist, and the therapist works on him like a car. He's like, oh, the problem is the carburetor's bad, so I'll take that one out and put another one in. Right. Whereas Jung was like, no, a person is like the weather. If you change how much cold air is blowing through, then it's going to get too hot somewhere else. Like there's going to be an ongoing series of fluctuations. And so that's how I feel. I feel like over time as a storyteller, you shoot for being authentic by turning up this part of your personality. And then you get to a point where you're like, geez, I turned that part of my personality up too high. I remember at one point, my producer for Risk, back in the day, Michelle Walston, said that sometimes I was speaking too quickly and with too much blaseness, as if people understood what I was saying. So maybe I should slow down and speak more as if I was a newbie and everyone else was a newbie. And that really worked for me for a time, until I got to the point where I realized, I'm sounding now like I'm talking to everyone like I'm a third grade teacher.
Yeah, you take it to a yeah. I mean, I think as performers and any kind, it's true. I think as performers and any kind of artist, we have to stretch ourselves to an excessive limit and then bring it back.
Yeah,
and find another limit to take it to, and then bring it back, and then take it to another limit. You mentioned a couple times now growing up, and I guess you had sort of a. You were trying to live a life that maybe you weren't comfortable with, it sounds like. Because if you were being told that don't do this, don't do that. Where in there did you find it, like an idea, hey, performing might be a way for me to do some of this stuff?
Oh, you know what? It's very funny. There is actually a story that I have about that. I do know that when my little sister was born, when I was 3 years old, I think my parents thought that I would be the last, the fourth would be the last. And then 3 years later, my mom got pregnant again. And I was so excited because I thought I was going to have a little buddy. I thought I was going to have a brother who could be, who I could be the mentor to and all that sort of thing. And I had this little guy all planned up in my 3-year-old head. And then she had a girl, and I don't know why it hadn't occurred to me that could happen.
Did you skip that day in biology?
But I was terribly disappointed that Rebecca was born as a girl. In fact, I even told the neighbor. The neighbor was like, "Oh, what's your sister going to be named?" And I was like, "Fred, I hope."
And how much older were you than she?
3. I was just 3.
3. So at 3, you have a lot of hopes and dreams, and reality doesn't necessarily have to play into it, do it?
Exactly. Yeah. So, but I I don't vividly remember, but I have been told that I was just bouncing off the walls then, because I had been the youngest, and all of a sudden she was just the apple of everyone's eye. And she was my mother's new favorite because she was the baby. Of course, that's how it works.
Yeah, especially in a family with 5. That's there's not as much mom and dad to go around.
Yeah, exactly. So I was. They started calling me Spaz at that point because my brothers and sisters, because I think I was overcompensating, trying to get more attention.
Okay.
And then when I was in kindergarten at 6, I remember the very first day of kindergarten, I for some reason made everyone laugh or did something wrong or whatever, and the teacher. What was her name? Mrs. Patty Shaw, held me and this little girl named Rachel after class for just what was probably 10 minutes, but to a kid, it seems like a half hour. Yeah. And we were supposed to just keep our heads laid down on our crossed arms on our desks with our eyes closed as if we were sleeping. That was our punishment. While the other kids just filed out, and she saw them out. But I just go to this little girl. She's across the room, Rachel. I'm going, psst, psst. And I got her attention. And the teacher's stapler was left on the desk that I had my head laying on. So I started doing this routine. It was like a Charlie Chaplin or a Buster Keaton routine, where I started acting like I was going to staple my thumb. I would go, ooh, like I'm going to staple my thumb and then stop at the last minute. And she started laughing. And then I did it again, and she laughed more. And it was the first time that I was conscious, at least that I can remember, of thinking, there's power in this.
Yeah.
That little girl is adorable, and she's probably, I probably sensed she was going to be a popular girl and everything. And I was making her laugh. And I felt like this is this works. This has a social function. So I got carried away with the third or fourth time I was doing this little Watsy here. And I went, oop, and I slammed that fucker and put a staple into my thumb. So at that point, I'm like, oh my God. And the teacher comes in and she's like, what the
I'm sure at the time you thought, oh man, I'm dead because and for her, she's thinking, I'm dead because one of my students I left I left 2 kids in a room for a second. I come back and one is bleeding. That's probably got to be the worst thing a teacher can experience. But that's for you,
true.
You probably now did that fuel like your sense of this comedy, or did it like take it away from you for a little bit?
No, it totally fueled it. It was almost as if, oh no, this guy is very loud. Should I ask him?
Nah. You know what? Let's play with it.
Okay.
Let's have it be, because this is New York City, man. This is life in the big city.
Yeah.
People who talk too loud in the hallway.
I live in the loudest apartment building. I live in Harlem, and it's very Latino around here. I'm not sure if it's more Dominican or Puerto Rican. But yeah, my particular building is very, very loud, and it just echoes a lot. Anyway. So yeah, no. I think I did what a lot of comedians did, which is that I immediately started associating comedy with being a form of letting people know you were weird. Because I was already very aware at the age of 6 in kindergarten that I was gay. I knew what the word gay meant. I knew what the word fag meant. And I knew that was me.
Well, so wait, where was this?
Cincinnati, Ohio.
In Cincinnati, Ohio. Back then, and you and I are similar age. How was it that you had... Was it openly discussed? Because
no.
Nowadays it's more common, but back then it wasn't so common to even talk about it, much less.
It was that kids would use those words as the ultimate slur,
even at 6.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I knew what the bad words were to call black people. I mean, the two words that really stick in my mind are the bad word to call black people and those bad words to call gay people. And I don't think that most kids in the neighborhood had a sense that there was a gay community or that there was a gay,
or even what did you have a sense of what gay actually indicated? I mean,
no, I absolutely knew that people linked it to the idea of a boy liking a boy physically, sexually, and that it was also even more linked. The even more common meaning, more direct meaning of the word back then for kids was meaning you are lame.
Right.
Yes,
it's unfortunately co-opted as a comment on somebody's being, regardless of sexuality,
right.
but I mean, sexuality as a 6-year-old, and I have a 6-year-old daughter, so I'm trying to like analyze her at the same time I'm saying this, is that I'm pretty sure she has no idea what goes on if the term sex comes up, but she has romantic feelings for classmates and things like that. Was it more of that, or did you? Well, did you feel a physical attraction?
Oh, I did.
You did?
I absolutely did. The first time that I don't know if I talked about this on Maron or not, but there was a little Hummel statue that when I was about 3.5, I was very attracted to, because you could see the little boy in the statue. You could see his butt, his pajama bottom was coming open. And my mom, once she knew that I was interested in that, took it away. And then when I was 5, I got the boy next door to take off his clothes and show me various parts of him. And I knew what I was doing there. I was being manipulative. But recently, not recently, but maybe about 10 years ago, I went home. And it was my mother and father's 50th anniversary, and the woman who used to live next door, the mother of the boy next door, she came up to me, and she was pretty drunk, and she said, I don't know how she initiated the conversation, but she definitely wanted to let me. I guess I was out, in Out magazine and stuff like that. So it was out in the general ether, and she was like, "Listen, you have no idea. You were trying to get pants off when you were still not even 1 year old." She said, "I remember one day I was washing the dishes, and should I have mentioned his name?"
Mr. X.
The 1-year-old Mr. X.
The 1-year-old Mr. X. I don't know. We'd have to ask him.
Maybe in the thing you could just bleep out.
Bleep it out. We'll take care of you. Yeah. I've already forgotten his name.
So anyway, she's doing the dishes. She's watching the two of us. We're about 1 year old, and we're literally right outside on the patio. There's a window that she's looking out on us on. And she said, I had taken off my diapers and got in a bucket and pulled off his diapers and was pulling him into the bucket when she had to run out and stop me. So she said, no, you were always trying to get his pants off.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that stupid debate about, it's nature or nurture. I mean, that kind of says right there. I mean, Kevin Allison, 1 year old. He knew what he wanted.
Oh, yeah. And was very conscious of it. Mike Daisy said something in a story once, which I found very profound. He said, the problem with being a self-aware child, the problem with being an unusually, what they call an unusually smart kid, especially when it comes to self-consciousness, self-awareness, is that you kind of tend to mature quicker in terms of psychologically individuation, right? But once you get to, say, college, everyone has caught up. So, I was exactly one of those kids who, for example, knew he was gay and knew what gay meant when I was still, within my first, several years of living. But by the time I got to college, I was so scarred from being so terrified of being an alien that all of a sudden, what I found was this. I became the guy in high school who helped other guys come out of the closet.
Okay.
I was the Socrates character, mentoring guys to help them feel okay. But
this way, gentlemen.
But not having sex with them. What I would do is I would be their sort of therapist of it's okay to be gay because, people knew that I was in high school. And I'd be like, it's okay. Here's some advice. Here's how to deal with it. And then watch them immediately get boyfriends. Same thing in college. I would help guys figure it out and then immediately watch them get boyfriends. But I couldn't because I had grown up feeling like such an alien that now that I wasn't at an age where it really was okay.
Right.
I was too fucked up from all those years of feeling like I'll never be with someone because no one's like me.
Right. Even though you're seeing examples of people like you and even far more probably out there than you were.
Yeah. That's the whole problem with those foundational things that happen to us when we're children is that we have certain experiences in our relationships with our parents or our brothers and sisters or some of our peers that become very archetypical for us. And we just kind of sometimes we'll get caught up in an energy complex where we kind of relive those patterns. I went through this with my therapist the other day. I went through my whole history of being gay and realized that it really is an ongoing cycle of micro stories and macro stories. The macro would be my 9-year marriage, and the micro stories would be the little ones like trying to come out to someone for the first time, my best friend when I was 12 years old. They're all stories of being abandoned or rejected ultimately.
Sure.
For being gay or trying to maintain some sort of a romantic connection with someone. So it's interesting. I feel like, oh my gosh, now that I'm 45, I really have to make some sense out of this and start stepping out of that cycle. Yeah.
You said that, you helped usher people into the comfort with their lives, but you weren't able to get boyfriends or anything like that. When did the switch flip, or did it flip, where you said like, "Oh, I can do this now"?
Of getting together with gay men?
Yeah. When you felt like, okay, I'm here and this is what I can do, and I want to enjoy this with other people.
Well, it's really interesting because when I was in my 20s in New York, I came here when I was 18 to go to NYU. And I've told those stories on Risk a lot. They're comedies of error stories. When I first... the first week I was here when I was 18 years old, I went into Central Park in the middle of, at 4 o'clock in the morning looking for where this place is that guys have sex.
And this was back
1988.
When Central Park was not.
Oh, yeah. When Central Park was
safe
dangerous.
Place. Yeah. It's not completely safe now, but.
Right.
I mean, were you warned about like the dangers of. Because, I don't want to skip over it completely, although I'm sure you've talked about a lot of this stuff, but. I'm always fascinated by people who come from anywhere else to New York for the first time, especially when you came, when it was pre-internet boom, pre-Giuliani, pre-let's clean up the streets. There was still a lot of danger on the streets back then.
Yeah. You're absolutely absolutely right. Times Square was still a pretty messy place and far more interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I feel nostalgic for the murder and the stabbing and the mugging. Yeah.
But no, I would say that my late teens and early 20s in New York, or all of my 20s in New York, were mostly about being very drunk in the gay male scene.
You mean alcohol drunk or just like in heavily engaged?
No. Well, highly drunk in order to deal with the social anxiety.
Okay. Yeah.
Because there were two things that I was dealing with. One, I was like, holy shit, I've wanted this all my life. Now I have it. But everyone else seems more comfortable because they're just realizing they're gay. And at the same time they're realizing it, they're like, oh, it's okay. And there's a whole community for it.
Yeah.
Whereas I had felt like such an alien before. So I had all this, this albatross on my neck. But also, I associated male competition, the whole energy around male competition, as something that was very frightening to me. I had to play baseball, basketball, football, soccer. I think that was it, but I hated all of them.
But you did it anyway.
Swim team, I hated all of them.
Throughout high school? No. Okay, so when you were younger.
Yeah, by high school was finally when my parents were like, okay, because it was mostly my brothers were like, he's got to play football or else people think he's a fag.
Okay, yeah.
But by high school, I was like, Mom, can I finally stop playing these games?
Okay.
And do the goddamn theater shows. Yeah.
Can I do what God intended me to do, please?
But no.
Can I join my brethren on the stage? God damn it. Sorry, go ahead.
But no, I associated that energy of men competing for something with those sports and even board games. Monopoly was terrifying to me.
Just too much competition. Right? You're not a competitive person. Right. You know what I do? What I am realizing about you, and something I didn't know before this is how much of a mentor naturally you seem to want to be. It sounds like it started real early, and maybe as early as 1 year old, trying to mentor somebody into a bucket, and then later mentoring people in many ways. And I think Risk is kind of an example of you wanting to mentor people through things in their lives. Where did that come from?
Well, that is really, really interesting that you say that. For example, last night, Buck Angel shared a story at the Risk Live show. He is a trans man. He got his career started as a gay male porn star, and with the tagline "The Man with a Pussy." Okay, so he was something completely radical.
I think there are still barriers to cross, and I guess people who are transgender on any level are still kind of like catching up. Right?
Oh yeah. And they have a lot of experiences in certain communities where they feel a little bit this way and a little bit that way, which is fascinating because I'm always fascinated in people's stories about having mixed feelings, because I think that we have this tendency when we tell stories to, especially in the political sphere in America, to want to boil things down to some simple black and white.
It makes for good TV, but it doesn't make for really good conversation.
Right. Yeah. And it's usually not entirely truthful. Yeah. So anyway, Buck pitched this story to me about this very scary experience that he had at the Black Party, which is the biggest BDSM dance party in the gay world. It happens in New York every March, and it's kind of it's a very, very fucked up party. It's very, very dark and very, very, there's just sex all over the place, and drugs all over the place. But anyway, Buck told this story, and in the process of it, what I do is I'll listen to the person's story. I'll have them send me a recording, and then I'll write to them notes, right? I'll write them a long, very long email of my thoughts. And my thoughts are meant to do a few things. One, make them more and more comfortable, like a hypnotist, with the idea of digging a little bit deeper. Get them more and more into like a meditative state where they might feel like, oh, wait, yeah, there is a little bit more to this. Oh, yeah, I should really ask myself why I was feeling that way or how I let myself get into that sort of mindset, so I start to like a therapist and like a hypnotist kind of start like presenting possibilities to perhaps you felt this way, or maybe you can remember a moment of fantasizing along such and such a line. So I'm presenting all sorts of possibilities to, I don't know what the hell their actual experience might have been, but I'm kind of poking at them.
Yeah.
And then Buck he was like, holy shit, those notes were so provocative. So he sends me a second draft, and then I do the same thing. I usually send like 2 rounds of notes. And the second round of notes is again, just digging deeper and deeper into it. And then I'm just like, okay, you've had enough notes now just get up on stage and try to be honest.
Yeah.
If you forget half of what I said, fuck it. You know what I mean? It's your story.
Yeah.
You got to just try to stick to the truth. And so we did it last night, and it was really amazing. And he came up to me afterwards and he was like, that was fascinating going through that process with you. It was a real sort of hand-holding process where you really did help me think all that through and brought a lot of memories back into my being able to feel them in my body and everything. And I was like, yeah. So there is a mentoring there. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I think what it is absolutely directly tied to me being a self-aware little boy who was like, oh my God, everyone thinks this part of me is so fucked up. But you know what? There was another part of me that always knew it was just naturally what I was, right? I remember when I read Huckleberry Finn I have no idea how old I was when I read Huckleberry Finn. I read it several times as a kid, but there's this amazing passage in it. It's several pages long where Huck has been raised in this super, super Christian household, right? And according to Christianity in America at that time, it was, you would go to hell if you were to help a slave get to freedom. Because, I don't know, there's a lot of biblical passages.
Because reasons that we don't understand anymore. I don't mean to derail your story here, but we look at things like that as American classics, and rightly so. But man, if they aren't just like the worst example of who we could be as people.
Well, actually, in the case of Huck Finn, it's a very good example, because what Twain is doing in this story is he's showing us how this boy was raised. And what Huck does for these several pages is say, but he's my friend.
Oh, of course. No, I'm not saying Huckleberry Finn in that story, but his family and those beliefs that they bring up. It's just a stark reminder of how far we have come, but how if we're not being careful, we could fall right back to that same thinking.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. I think we're still, the trouble with America is that we are kind of, I think, we are exactly what I was talking about before with myself. Our origin story has a lot of inequality and a lot of fear of the other wrapped up into it. Our origin story is about coming over here, killing 10 million people, and then enslaving millions and millions more. I mean,
but we don't. We're going to gloss over that in 5th grade. All right, we're not going to talk too detailed about that.
So yeah, so there's in our formative years, we were very, very caught up in the darkness. That's why I'm that book that your microphone Moby Dick is one of my favorites. It was written right on the eve of the Civil War. It was published right on the eve of the Civil War, and no one read it at that time.
Yeah. But poor Herman Melville. Oh man, that guy got dicked over. Ironically so.
But what the most common interpretation of the book, there are a bazillion interpretations of the book, but the most common is because there's so much race going on in that book. He's constantly obsessed with the way that the poorer and darker people on the boat are treated differently, et cetera, but that he's always talking about the democracy of God, talking about how God seems to give good traits to a person regardless of the color of their skin and yada, yada, yada. But the book is ultimately about some sort of obsessively dark thing that is inevitably going to bring about destruction. And so a lot of people feel like, whether it's conscious or unconscious, this is a book about the coming Civil War. This is a book about some really dark thing in the heart of America that just, we could not put it off any longer. It was going to become the boat's going down.
Yeah. Now, okay. Throughout this conversation, in my head, I've been drawing a lot of parallels, which are fascinating to me, because I'm hearing your story about your coming of age as a gay man and discovering your kink and all that stuff. But as you're talking about it, it sounds exactly like I talk about when I call myself an actor. Because growing up, I wanted to do this. I want to do this forever. But I was convinced that it's not exactly the safe way to go.
Of course.
And you have to be, you have to look like Tom Cruise. And, right. It's hard to make a living, blah, 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 blah. So I denied it. And in college, I did broadcasting, which was close, but it wasn't quite what I wanted to do. And it took a lot longer for me to be comfortable enough in my own shoes, like around 30, for me to say, okay, yeah, I'm going to give this acting thing a try. And that sort of development almost seems like it follows your path on a personal level entirely.
Oh, yeah.
Which is really fascinating. And I wonder if you can put those same pins in someone's, life story, regardless of what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah. Like a part of what I think the overall philosophy of the podcast Risk is it's inviting people to come out about whatever they'd like to come out about, or to stand confidently in what they feel they really are, to be authentic in a way that they might have felt that they were unable to be before. So however that might be, I mean, it might just be that a person is used to coming up on stage and getting laughs every 8 seconds as a stand-up comedian. And tonight they're going to just take a risk and try to, even if it's not all that profound, just try to talk without laughs, or someone might come up on Risk like the guy last night, the guy who started our show last night, who had never stood up in front of an audience and done anything before.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, that's how I know you talked a lot about, and you started off by saying you had spoken with Marc Maron, and you've told a lot of stories about Risk and how it came to be and all that stuff. But as it stands right now, you talked about the process of how you work with somebody to get them ready to go up on stage. How long did it take to develop that process?
The process of how I help people tell stories.
How you usher them along.
It's been a constantly evolving thing. It started off with me talking to people on the phone. It took me a while to realize that the phone is not, there's something disconnecting about the damn phone. I don't know.
It's true.
I don't know what it is. 100%
true. You were on, you were nice enough to come on a podcast. The first podcast I ever did that I did with my buddy Ken Pond. It was the commercials free podcast, which no one listened to. And doing that, I almost insisted that we should do them on the phone because it gives someone a sense of like, okay, I'm not quite there. I feel a little more comfortable. It's an idea I stole from Imus. And then in doing this one, I'm like, I want to do these in person.
Yeah.
I could interview over the phone and I'm sure you'd be awesome, but we wouldn't have this ability to look each other in the eye. I think you're 100% right.
Yeah.
That you have to have that human connection.
Yeah.
Right then and there.
But it's weird that I've evolved toward, well, first of all, I do get recordings from people, but those recordings feel much more present because the person is speaking directly into a microphone. So it doesn't, I guess phones feel tinny is part of what the sound feels very reduced. Whereas when someone sends you a recording like this recording now, it feels a little bit more present, like they're speaking right into your ear.
Yeah,
literally, because oftentimes I'm listening back with earbuds. But anyway, then I get a lot of time time to ruminate, because as the person giving notes, I'm not much of I've never been. I should say historically. I should say historically because I don't want to lock myself off from the future. But historically, I've never been much of an improviser. You know, I'm a guy who loves to be able to sit back for a moment, think of how I'm going to compose a sentence, and then, you know, compose it rather gradually. I'm a slow mover with most things. So yeah, these emails that I'll send back to people, or sometimes I'll send a recording back of my notes, are pretty gradually thought out as well. I don't know how. I mean, the thing about Risk is, and I. At the beginning of the process of starting Risk, I had 12 years of failure behind me. The state broke up in 96, and Risk started up in the summer of 2009. But
there we go again.
Yeah, the singing in the hallways.
Awesome.
If he keeps singing, I might just pop my head out. But no. I knew when I started Risk, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the first thing I've worked on in the 12 years since the state broke up that I really think has legs. You know, it's funny. It was just this. It was the same with when I met my husband when I was 31. I was just like, this is the first guy I've gone on some dates with in my whole life where I was like, I just have a solid, peaceful, confident feeling in this. I'm not desperately grasping at straws here. I'm just feeling like
it just feels right.
No, this is working.
Yeah.
So I knew that I had all this failure behind me, and I thought to myself, I better keep track of how I'm putting all this together. But then what eventually happens with any giant creative process, because us creators, you want to read about how they made Seinfeld work or whatever the hell it is, you know? You want to know all the nitty-gritty.
Sure.
But everyone forgets, because it just kind of, eventually it's like a marriage where you try something one week, then you're like, no, that doesn't seem to be working. Then you try something the next, and by the end of the year you kind of forget. You're like, oh yeah, in the beginning we actually were, you know, trying to get people to develop stories by improvising them, you know, like,
yeah. No, you know, it is true that you know, we all look for, and everybody across the board wants an organic process to happen. And you feel most fulfilled by an organic process. Right. Yet at the same time, we're all looking for that formula for success. Yeah. And you realize that it's like, okay, if I choose to find a formula, I'm looking for a quick answer. Yeah. And you know, kind of like the slam dunk. But nobody appreciates that. But the organic process is the one that's really going to take you to where you really want to go.
I can say this, if I had one piece of advice that really comes the most from my heart, if someone was in my position when I was starting Risk, and it's a frustrating piece of advice to give out, because it makes me feel like, oh, that's easy to say but very hard to do, is to find 1, 2, 3, or, you know, however many people you need, but at least 1, hopefully 2, maybe 3 people who really, really get what you're doing and really, really love what you're doing and can really contribute to it. Because the Risk would not exist today if JC Cassis, my producer, had not joined the team about 2 years in. She is someone who has a mind for business. She's someone who is good at staying organized and disciplined and keeping the trains moving on time, which is something that, you know, you and I met while I was the artistic director at the Pit.
Yes.
That was a largely administrative job with, you know, 80 emails a day to answer. And people used to joke that Kevin's so nice and friendly and fun and supportive, but a mess. You know, I'm just not good at staying on top of a bunch of organizational
it was not a good suit. You weren't suited for it, and it wasn't suited for you. Exactly. It's just the way things go.
I was double booking shows left and right. Man. It was a mess.
You know, you reached out, you know, I mentioned the commercials earlier, you had reached out and offered us like a run at the Pit just as we broke up. And it was one of the real, God damn it moments of my life. You know, it's just like you somehow you got wind of us and you were like, hey, you guys.
What was the name of your girl?
The Commercials.
Oh,
and,
okay.
And this was back in 2006 or 2007. Oh, wow. And it was like, you know, you are inherently tied into a story, like one of the threads of my life because of that moment where it was like almost like the day after I was like, God damn it. You know, like we fell apart and suddenly you were offering us like a spot at the Pit. It was like,
that's amazing.
But I'm, you know, all's well that ends well.
Yeah.
So how long? Well, first of all, you mentioned JC.
Mm-hmm,
yeah. What was it that convinced her that it was worthwhile to jump on board? I mean, there's not a lot of money in podcasting, so it couldn't have been necessarily like financially motivated. But. No,
you know what? This is another answer that I can give that is going to be frustrating to a lot of people. And it was the same with my husband. It's so funny. My work and my personal life keep lining up. He was a fan of the state. She was a fan of the state.
Okay, yeah. So for all you kids out there wanting to put together your own podcast, all you have to do
successful TV show
have a legendary sketch comedy show on MTV that basically comes out of nowhere and changes television.
It's you know, it's funny because you often hear artists making fun of the whole idea of, you know, I don't want to date someone who because they're a fan, or I don't want to like hire someone to work for me because they're a fan. And it's like, that's total fucking bullshit. If what you're doing by creating some art is interesting and you care about it and you're really putting your heart and soul into it, of course, it's wonderful to meet people who are like, I love what you do.
Oh, yeah.
And when it's storytelling, it's even more like, I mean, true storytelling, it's even more like, well, of course, there's a persona in place when Kevin tells stories. That's not, I can never say that that's not a slightly fictionalized me. I'm not going to be like, I would never, the grilling that Bill O'Reilly and Brian Williams are getting right now for the authenticity of them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do very well with that kind of fact checking.
Yeah. I think it's what's protected Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert.
Yeah, is that, you know, I mean, they don't present themselves as journalists. Right.
It's a layer of like between them and journalism that protects them and lets them do what they do, which almost gives better authenticity to it than O'Reilly or. I love this building. This building is.
What the fuck is that?
I believe that's the blessing of the pigeons. I don't know.
Oh, Jesus God.
So yeah, no, I think the person you're with, I think it's less about worrying about whether or not they were a fan of your previous work. It's whether or not they can put up with you when you're not on, and like the person you are when you're not on stage and stuff like that. And I think that's maybe what people are worried about. Like, man, I have to be like this, and when I'm home too, as I struggle with that. You know, in my history where it was like, you know, for a long time I didn't know how to turn it off, and just be real with somebody.
Yeah. So
being with somebody who I could just let it all go with, and they weren't going to run out the door. That's like, wow, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. You know, like I'm not entirely frightening to somebody. Yeah. Because I'm not making them laugh every 10 seconds.
Yes. I think that a lot of us, comedians and entertainers, a lot of the reason for performing is to work with parts of our personality that where we want to turn up the volume and impress people with this or that part of us. Like I literally in high school would go to parties with a paper in my pocket of funny lines that I might say during the course of the party that I pre-thought out. But yes, you want to be able to make truly deep connections in your personal life with people who are okay with you being kind of boring or being a little bit messy or being, you know, whatever your foibles or flaws are, you know, of course you cannot be on all the time. And I think a lot of people in my life, come to the, difficult realization. And I think this is so common for so many comedians, you know, like Peter Sellers was supposedly, you know, just, you know, delightfully adorable when the cameras were on and then kind of a dick.
Yeah, there's tons of examples of that.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm that way too. You know, I felt back in my marriage with my husband, I would feel like I would just be on when I was out there in public. And there's a part of the psyche that once you're in private with someone, then just wants to be your worst self, your crabbiest self, your most out of touch self.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to learn how to balance that too, and make sure you're not like dumping all the worst of yourself on the people who are closest to you and the best of yourself on people who are like, you know, don't have to deal with you after they turn off the radio.
Yeah, it's like you gotta find that golden. It's true. It's definitely true. I mean, you have to find that golden ratio. Like when I'm in public or in business or whatever like that, you know, maybe it's like 80%, 20%. You know, you give 20% of yourself. Yeah. And then the 80% is that on person. Yeah. And then at home, you can make it, you know, the other way around. Where it's like I'm 80% real here, but just that 20% so that, you know, they don't stab you with a knife, you know. How long did it take before you felt risk was on its way? Like what was the indicator to you that risk was the thing that it is now? Because what kind of, you said you would post on Facebook recently. What was you had like a certain number of downloads that you were like, okay, yeah.
We're now, in January, we were nearly 1 million downloads in 1 month.
Which is amazing.
Yeah. And I think that even though February is a shorter month, I think I'm thinking that the WTF will keep us there or, you know, over it.
Yeah.
You know, it's really, really, really hard to say because I dreamed of a tipping point at the beginning. I remember Maron's, by the way. I remember that about a year and a half into his podcast, he got like 3 things at once: a New York Times article, an interview with, I think, Robin Williams, and maybe a third thing that just clearly took him from popular podcast to super popular podcast. Yeah. And I can't really pinpoint I mean, I feel almost like now might be our tipping point of heading into super solid popularity. But what has impressed me is what I have learned from these 5 years is that one should be happy with and content with the idea of very gradual growth and just keeping it going. Like I was literally, you know, so desperate by the time I started. I was, you know, a large part of it was being 39. I started Risk. I was like, look, I'm 39. I'm about to be 40. I've got to put all my eggs in one basket that I really believe in. I've got to do some dramatic gesture that really, 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 because I was like, I can't move into my 40s with this same sense of, you know, survival jobs and failure and just cluelessness about what I was doing.
It'll work out eventually.
Yeah.
I had that same sense too.
I think that a lot of artists like spend a lot of time in their 20s and 30s, like, not sure to what extent they can fully devote themselves to something. In my own case, it was like I had tried so many other things. I had literally left the performing arts for 4 years to try to go into publishing, to be an editor. I worked at like Rolling Stone and Spin and places like that for a while, and a book publishing company. And I finally realized I was like, nah. I gotta be using my voice. I gotta be using the stage and using recording and all that, you know, as a performer. And I think that at some point I really did settle into this idea. If I am going to be poor for the rest of my life, fine. I gotta do what I gotta do.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that's the true essence of art. You know, you've taken it out of a necessity to be famous, or a necessity to make $1 billion, and you made it about what you really wanted to do. And did you at some point also, I mean, it sounds like you had the same conclusion that a lot of people have. At a certain point, you have to say, I'm going to take control of something and just do it.
Yeah. Well, in fact, it was a part, Risk was part of the reason, just a part. I mean, it's unfair for me to tell the story as if it was the main reason, but it was definitely a part of the destruction of my marriage. It became a full-time job. Risk became a full-time job for me, like like immediately, like right from the beginning. So I wasn't doing any other work. So for the first year and a half or 2 years, I was bringing in like nothing. My husband was more or less supporting me. And about a year and a half in, he was like, look, this is just not working. You need to get a full-time job. And I said, well, look, if I get a full-time job, that's the death of risk. It just can't go on unless I'm devoting everything to it. And he was like, well, then it's me or risk,
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it came down to that.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, there were I love my husband. We're still good friends. In fact, we're also still married. We were just super, super lazy about actually,
You mentioned you're slow to move on things. So yeah.
But we're getting it done this next month in April. We've got the paperwork now. But anyway, we're still good friends. So I'm very, very thankful of that. But yeah, no, there were lots of other factors. First of all, we didn't feel romantic toward each other anymore. Like we felt more like friends or brothers, probably more like brothers, actually. We were just so interested in different things and so busy with different things. And let's face it, I have a lot of flaws when it comes to being someone's partner. I have a lot of learning still to do in that area. The next time I'm in a serious relationship, thank God I'm in therapy now, because this time when I get into a serious relationship, I want to make sure that there's constant communication all the time. It's very interesting to be in the kink community and the poly community. In the polyamorous and the open relationships world, there are all these exercises and activities that people do on a regular basis if they're a couple that's in an open relationship, that are, teachers that teach people how to be in open relationships share. And they're all about communication. They're all about checking in. Yeah. And I've learned some of these and tried them with some people who are, more or less just more like friends with benefits, but it's still been interesting to do it, and thought to myself, wow, this stuff would be good for totally monogamous people too.
Yeah, no, I think, it's funny. You said this and it made me think, you're talking about, the kink and the poly and open relationships and things like that. And on some level it feels like, oh man, that sounds like a dream. Like it just sounds like the easy life. Right. But then there's that practical part of me that realizes that's just a lot of freaking work, man. That's a lot more work that I'm willing to invest. Let me just stay with my monogamous relationship because that is smooth sailing, okay?
But I think what I said was true. It is, even if you are in a monogamous relationship and you're totally content, it is worth looking into some of these communication exercises people do, because I think that those could help monogamous people. I don't know.
There's no relationship without communication. Yeah. And there's just not. Yeah. And I think the successful marriages and successful partnerships and successful relationships, period, depend upon that. Yeah. And I think that's what most people just don't want to invest the time or energy into. And that's what makes things fall apart a lot of the time. So, yeah.
But no, I think at some point in this interview, there's just it's just like,
I think we're getting toward the end of the podcast, just before like the Mardi Gras starts out in the hallway. This is good.
No, I need to put up some sort of soundproofing in this. Like the recording will take place in the bedroom, but I just don't know how to. I don't know. I got to build some sort of booth. Anyway, I've talked about a little bit of fatigue around some of my kinky and poly sort of life. And I think some of that fatigue is me being 45 and wanting to be like, oh, let's just have like a simple marriage. Yeah.
I'm about as, the kink to me would be watching the movie with our socks off. That would be kinky. Yeah. The popcorn, we're going to put garlic salt on the popcorn. That's as exotic as I feel like being now. Anyway, before things go out of control in the hallway, thanks so much. You know what? I really was kind of intimidated doing this, knowing you had just kind of done the Marc Maron experience. But I'm so glad this worked out because we got different stuff done.
Oh yeah, we definitely
did.
And
I'm really happy with how this turned out. So thanks so much.
I am too. Thank you.
How do people keep in touch with you?
I am at the Kevin Allison on Twitter. And Risk is at risk-show.com. And my school, where I train people in storytelling, it's one-on-one over Skype or various workshops, thestorystudio.org.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Thank you. And thanks to the people in the hall.
That's Kevin Allison, the one and only. Fascinating guy. Very cool to talk to. And he put a challenge in front of me, and I took it, and I got through it, and I'm a better man for it. So I feel like I've survived the risk. Tie it up with a bow. It's a great conversation. I'm glad we were able to do it. If you want to keep up with Kevin and follow his career, you can follow him on Twitter at the Kevin Allison. You can also visit the official website for The Risk Show. That's risk-show.com. Find out all the information about that amazing podcast. And if you're interested in his storytelling workshops, you can go to thestorystudio.org, and all the information is laid out there. And you can always reach out to Kevin through Twitter if you want more information about his kink camps and the erotic hypnosis stuff. And why not? Go for it. Life is too short. Do something crazy. I'm all for it, and I certainly won't judge you if you choose to go and explore yourself and other people, because that's what makes the world go round. Thanks to Kevin for hosting at his crazy apartment, and look forward to keeping in touch with you and your efforts to take over the world of podcasting. That about does it for another edition of Bring Your Own Lunch. Thank you for joining. Thanks to Banuba, banuba.net, BANOOBA.net. You can go there, download some of their music, see them live. They're awesome live. And just tell them, hey, Bring Your Own Lunch sent you. And don't forget to go to our website, bringyourownlunch.com. You can send me a personal email, dave@bringyourownlunch.com. You can follow us on Twitter at BYOL Podcast. You can like us on Facebook, facebook.com/bringyourownlunch. And you can follow us on Instagram at bringyourownlunch. And of course, please, if you have the opportunity, go to iTunes or Stitcher and rate, review, subscribe. This program needs some word of mouth to let people know what's going on, because it's a beautiful thing when you share what we're doing here with a friend. Make it count more. That's awesome. So help me out, would you? Please. Stay tuned for Jimmy Jack's Cowpunch Hour, followed by Mansoor and the Fish. And until next week, when I have another great guest lined up, this is Dave. I'll see you next Tuesday. This entire episode was ripped off.